Well, welcome everybody to Hot Mississippi Minute. I'm your Executive Director of Waterloo Human Rights Commission, Abraham L. Funchess Jr. And today I'm joined by the Reverend Dr. Michael D. Blackwell. He's a Professor Emeritus at UNI, and he's no stranger to the city of Waterloo because he's been around for 20 years doing some really progressive work with respect to Black history and a host of other subjects. So welcome, Dr. Blackwell. Glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah. What we want to talk about today, which I know you will be able to help us out tremendously, is the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. I think there's a 61-year anniversary tomorrow.
Yes.
And of course, we have an opportunity to discuss, what that was all about way back then, and the relevancy of the March on Washington even for today. Mm-hmm. And Doc, overall, what impact has the March on Washington had for you?
Well, personally, it's something that I can never forget. I mean, every year that August 28th comes around, that's the first thing on my mind when I wake up in the morning, about commemorating the march and the I Have a Dream speech and what it did, how it contributed to the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and just to know that people had, the inspiration to aspire to a better world, a better society, and that a diverse group of people came together on the Washington Mall to demonstrate that they felt that the Kennedy administration was not doing all that it could do to promote an egalitarian society, to include people that had been, historically oppressed and counted out of our society, and so it was a landmark occasion, and I feel that we need to continue to celebrate that and the legacy of the Civil Rights Movement overall.
Wonderful. Doc, remind us, what exactly have you done, or what do you do, or did you do at UNI?
Well, technically I was Director for Multicultural Education at UNI, and also I was an adjunct Associate Professor of Philosophy and World Religions. So I taught classes in Religion and Society, of course, on the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. I taught some intro sociology courses, racial and ethnic minorities, and just basic introduction to sociology of religion classes, war and Christian ethics, all kinds of things that deal with moral issues, social ethics, and those kind of things. But primarily, my main job was to be director of the Center for Multicultural Education and to help minority students adjust to being at a predominantly white campus, and also to help the larger campus and community to become more inclusive and to learn about different aspects of our cultural heritage in the United States. And so I try to do that by having programs, by doing diversity workshops, by bringing in, nationally and internationally known speakers to the Cedar Valley. So to help us become a little bit more acquainted with different lifestyles, different patterns of behavior, as well as to put a light on those things that were still discriminatory in our society that needed to be changed.
Fabulous, fabulous. Doc, it was through you that I first had opportunity to meet in person Dr. Carnell West, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, in addition to a few other popular personalities that we know today. Doc, the Center for Multicultural Education no longer exists at UNI. How does that make you feel?
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
Yeah, of course.
No, that is because of the era of getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The Board of Regents decided to stop those kinds of programs, and universities, abided by that, and it just shows that our society is not progressing as far as inclusion is concerned, but rather in a very real way going backwards and putting on some of the strictures that used to be the case, that was part of Jim Crow segregation, but still continues today, even though we claim that we're in a sort of a post-racial society, which of course we are not, because there's still institutional racism that goes on every day in our culture. And so it's really a kind of a lack of understanding of what is still necessary for people to come to a predominantly white institution where the majority of people are professionals on the campus are also white, and you don't see representatives of your own culture there in front of you, teaching you and whatnot. And that has been the case, for the past 20-some years that I've been at UNI, and prior to that, it was even worse. So, the situation is really still pretty dire, but it seems like we're so used to it and so numb to it now that we're in a very real sense sleeping through what was a revolution with the civil rights movement. We are still not carrying on what needed to be done to really welcome in that society where democracy and freedom and pluralism are appreciated.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that. Again, I'm Abraham Funchess, sitting with the Reverend Dr. Michael D. Blackwell, and I now want to ask you a few questions that relate specifically to the March on Washington. After all, we're going to be celebrating the 61, or commemorating the 61 anniversary of the March on tomorrow, which happens to be August 28. But it begs the question, what have we been able to really accomplish since that time? And so I guess the first question I might have is, what are the primary goals, or what were the primary goals of the March on Washington back in 1963?
Well, there were a mixture of goals, let's say, and some were in conflict. Some of the leaders were in conflict about what the goals were. The initial thing was, of course, to sort of prod the Kennedy administration to do what it had promised during the 1960 campaign, to be concerned about the issues that were plaguing African Americans at that time, and developing policies and programs and enacting legislation that would end discrimination. That was not happening. It was very slow, and with the demonstrations that were occurring, the Kennedy administration hesitated to protect marchers and demonstrators, and took a while before they were able to send in troops to protect marchers and demonstrators. And of course, the Birmingham campaign, which immediately preceded the March on Washington, was a successful campaign, although people were injured, and there were police dogs and the fire hoses that we've all seen that really were attacking young people, high schoolers and other teenagers that were demonstrating because their parents were afraid if they demonstrated, they would lose their jobs. And so James Bevel and some others decided to use children for the march, and Bull Connor just, did his thing and attacked the marchers. So it was trying to encourage the administration to live up to its promises, and stop lagging behind, and I think in a very real sense it was successful. The Birmingham campaign sort of forced President Kennedy to go on television on June 11th of 1963 to finally talk about racism as a moral issue in our country, and propose that night on live television that he would submit a civil rights bill to Congress. But of course, as you know, late that night, early on June 12th, Medgar Evers was shot in his driveway. So it's sort of the juxtaposition is very interesting, that here Kennedy finally is talking about racism as a moral issue, and that he was going to do something about it by putting forth a civil rights bill to Congress. People in the South decided that they didn't like that idea, and so symbolically, Medgar Evers was shot and killed in his driveway, the field director for the Mississippi NAACP, and that really shows the contrast between what was possible and also the kind of lifestyle that people in the South were used to, unfortunately. So.
Well, Doc, my understanding, I know you will correct me if I'm wrong, 250,000 people congregated on the mall, the Washington Mall,
yes,
for the day of the march. And of course, some more popular politicians, they may draw 20,000, 30,000, that kind of thing. But who were the key organizers of this march?
Well, I mean, the civil rights leaders, the Big Six as they called them, were part of it, but it really sort of started from Asa Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin wanting to have a march. They wanted to have a march on Washington way back in 1941, and they wanted to complain about economic justice, and they wanted to talk about how the defense industry was not hiring African Americans to work in the factories and businesses, and so they were threatening to have a march on Washington. But then Franklin Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, getting then the idea that they were wanting to do this, decided to pass an executive order to address some of the issues that Randolph and Rustin wanted to put forward. And Rustin didn't want to cancel the march, but A. Philip Randolph decided to cancel it because he wasn't getting as much support from union organizers, labor union organizers, as he wanted to, and so he canceled the march. You know, in 1957, the third-year anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education, again, A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin did put on a march on Washington. It was called the Prayer Pilgrimage for Peace, and there, of course, Martin Luther King was also the keynote speaker, and he talked about voting rights, actually, for much of the speech that he gave, but also talking about public education and desegregating public schools. But you see, the whole idea of the March on Washington in 1963 was very much the same as what they wanted to do in 1941. To address Jim Crow segregation, to stop segregating people in public facilities, allow people to eat wherever they wanted to eat, you know, and to travel on buses wherever they wanted to sit on the bus, and all that kind of stuff. And so they wanted to deal with that. Now the problem was that A. Philip Randolph, a unionist, wanted to talk primarily about economic justice, jobs and economic justice. But then, you know, guess what happened? J. Edgar Hoover and some Republican congresspersons started claiming that he was communist, right? And that the civil rights organizations were infiltrated by communism. And so in order to stop that from happening, they took out the idea of economic justice and changed it to jobs and freedom, to put a more emphasis on civil rights instead of economic justice. But of course, the idea of economic justice was still part of it, but it wasn't in the title, so to speak, so that they could tamp down on the rumors and the accusations about being communistic.
Okay, well, I mean, we're going to try to slowly round this out because it looks like we only have about 3 minutes left. But let me ask you this then. So what was the march originally titled? Because we know that we're commemorating the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Do you remember the name of the march?
Well, he wanted it to be for jobs and economic justice.
For jobs and
but
economic
they took off the economic justice. In actual fact, and a lot of people don't know this, was that A. Philip Randolph wanted to call it the October March. He wanted the march to be in October. Now, the problem with that was, of course, it harked back to the October Revolution in Russia,
right.
you know, the Bolshevik Revolution. And so, again, this whole idea of communism was there, so they had to scrap the whole idea of doing it in October. And so they decided on August 28th, which was the 8th anniversary you know, of the death of Emmett Till. And so they used that date as the marker for having that March for Jobs and Freedom.
Wow. Well, this is very interesting, Doc. And I think at this particular point, we probably close down this particular piece of Hot Mississippi Minute, but we hope to come back to you. Anyway, this is Abraham Funchess, Waterloo Human Rights Director. We'll see you soon. Bless you.